Hello, I'm Emilie Bellet, founder of Vestpod and author of You're Not Broke, You're Pre-Rich, and you're listening to The Wallet. Every week, we give you the best tips, guidance, and motivation to manage your money better. Today, I'm joined by psychotherapist Holli Rubin. We are talking about Christmas spending. We'll give you plenty of tips on how to understand how spending is affecting your brain, how to spend better, making a list, and really feel empowered during this Christmas season. This episode is supported by Vestpod. We are the home for financial education where we provide a newsletter, a podcast, and courses for you to learn about money and investing. You can join our next bootcamp online at vestpod.com/bootcamp. Holli, I'm super happy to have you on the show today, and I think this is a really topical subject for December. We're going to talk about spending. So I think if we go straight in, what is actually happening emotionally and psychologically in December, and why are we all a little bit like stressed? Money is one thing, but why all this excitement in December?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think we are all feeling it, right? There are the lights and the trees and the sparkle and all the videos that are going on and this excitement around Christmas time and what that means. And we all have a different idea of what Christmas is, but we also hold on to this idea of Christmas being the fantasy around Christmas, right? And the snow and the sparkle, and we love it. And there also is the reality of what Christmas can bring too. So joining those two bits up is something that I think we all feel inside, and we're all trying to manage in our own ways.
And I think something I see is we're all trying to have the perfect Christmas. What does that mean, and why is there so much pressure on us?
Yes. And this idea of just calling it perfect, right? This perfect Christmas. We all know that there is no such thing as a perfect Christmas, but we're sold this idea, aren't we? Again, in everything that we see from mid-November through till January, we're sold this idea of what Christmas is supposed to be. And we get impacted by that. And we sometimes lose sight of really, at the end of the day, what Christmas is meant to be all about. So I think it's important for us to keep in mind that there is no perfect Christmas and that we go in with our hopes. But there also is just a way of navigating that would be a good idea.
Yeah, and navigating the festive season financially is really tricky because we're talking about it, but you go through Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then I guess everyone is trying to do their Christmas present. So what happens in the brain when we shop under stress, and why does spending bring short-lived relief?
Yeah. Well, what happens is if you think about just putting yourself in that scenario, in that situation, and you're experiencing the pressure potentially of spending or of gift giving. And what happens is we go into this, our bodies actually go straight into the limbic system, and we have a cortisol rush, right? And we get excited and we get taken in and we want to do something with that energy. And we have the impulse to do, right? Which is often to buy, to tap, to charge. And then we make that purchase, or we think about making that purchase, and then we get a short dopamine hit. So we get that relief, but then that can go one of two ways. Either we can be pleased with our purchase and we can feel that that was a great, good idea, good purchase, or we can go into this place where we can get a little bit stressed by it or wonder why it wasn't really a relief after all, and potentially that can lead us into overspend too.
And is it something we are craving? So we're having this dopamine, cortisol. Do we want to repeat it again?
We can, certainly, because there is that little bit of addictive component to it, right? And before we get into that, let's say that we all want to feel good, right? Everybody has hopes and dreams for what Christmas is, and we all want to have a great experience. But there is also this idea that, it comes back to what we were saying initially, comes with the pressure. So how do we manage that pressure is some of the question.
When it comes to gifting and this pressure, so we'll talk about the impact on ourselves. But I was thinking, is it really out of generosity that we make? Is it quite genuine, or also when we make a gift is to prove something or is to show something? What do you think about it?
I think it's both of those things. Again, I think we all know that person. Hopefully we have one of them in our lives at least who is a really good gift giver. And good gift giving comes from a place of real empathy and really understanding the other person and what would make them happy. So being able to do that with a thoughtfulness is really, I would say, is unique. And not everybody can do that because often we're, by no fault of our own, but often we go into shops and places and sort of think, ooh, I would like that, or I would need one of those, or, oh, I saw someone had that bag, carrying that bag. That's something that maybe I should get another person. But it's not necessarily turning the table on what the other person would like. So I do believe there's generosity attached to it, but I also think that sometimes we buy in a way that's not necessarily right.
And how can someone tell when spending is meeting an emotional need instead of a practical one?
I think it comes down to recognizing how we feel, potentially in the moment, pre-purchase. And I think it's helpful to evaluate and to turn inward potentially before a purchase and to notice how you feel. Again, we're going to have physiological reaction. So our body's going to have reaction as well as an emotional, heartfelt reaction. And if we notice ourselves stressed, if we notice our heart racing or our hands clammy, those are indicators that we're experiencing something in a more stressful, less relaxed way. That's more of like a physiological response. In terms of a more calm, joyful, emotional way, if it makes us think about the other person, if there's connection involved, if there is warmth involved, as opposed to this sort of frenetic experience.
Yeah, I see what you mean in terms of buying and this excitement. But sometimes you could feel excited about buying all these things in the moment, but later regret some of these purchases. I mean, I see when you're on a shopping spree, you just tackle your Christmas shopping list.
Yeah.
You get excited, job is done, but you've maybe overspent a little bit, you didn't have a budget. So how to approach this, or is there a moment or a technique? I mean, how can we approach this list and do our Christmas shopping?
Yeah, I think preparing is the key, right? So this idea of having a bit of a plan, a bit of foresight in terms of being really practical. And sometimes we don't want to do that when it comes to Christmas or when it comes to gift giving. It sort of feels like it takes the fun out of it or the joy out of it. But I really do think it's a combination of both of it, and to be organized in terms of how to approach your gift giving. What is your budget? What can you afford so that you don't go into this place of overspend and then regret and then self-criticism, perhaps. I think it's really important to have both of it. It might not be as exciting and as, sexy to kind of have to plan it all out, but we know how important it is to do that, lest we end up in, big problems with our own January and February overspending. I listened to a podcast this morning, and they were talking about just how common it is to end up buy now, right? Pay later, buy now, pay later. Yeah. And it's such a dangerous spiral that many get into.
Yeah, I think there's been a few warnings, especially after Black Friday, of people buying and overspending using buy now, pay later and other forms of credits. And I think people, it will take them months to actually repay what they've been overspending now. So if you listen to this, I think, making a list, having a budget is really important. But that also brings something else. We'll talk about, do we have to gift to everyone, or can we actually have a short list? But also, I think there's a little bit of shame sometimes when we talk about, when we start linking the the value of the gift to someone, because we may think that, it's someone very important, I should give a bigger gift. So how do we separate this idea that how much you give is not necessarily the value of, how or how much you value the person?
Absolutely. I really think that that's so important, Emily. And it's something I feel that we almost teach our kids, right?
Yes.
Early on. It's very nuanced. So it's complicated to understand that. But I think it's really important that we don't attach a price tag to a gift. I mean, sometimes we know that we love receiving handmade gifts or cards from our kids or just something small that was bought at a Christmas fair. It really is the thought that counts. And I think that as a concept has really been lost over the last 10 years. We're so much more focused on the consumerism as opposed to this idea of connection, as opposed to what does gift giving really mean? What is it bringing to us? And how can we think about other people at a time when not everybody has the same things that we are fortunate enough to have? So I like to bring gratitude into this all the time, and I like to bring how are we helping others at this time too who are less fortunate. Really, really important, especially if we're raising young children too, to be able to bring this concept of giving and sharing as well.
Yeah. And you see some of your patients or women you talk to tackling this topic of shame around gifting, because maybe you don't have the budget to actually buy these gifts, and sometimes you will receive a gift or you won't, or not. But how do you approach this concept with money and shame?
Yeah. I think whenever we're talking about money, there is a taboo attached to that, right? And it's taboo because of the shame that gets attached to it. So why do we feel shame? What are we embarrassed about? Is a really good question, and it is different for everyone. I think the overspending when we don't have. And the pending worry of what it is we're going to have to contend with later is real. I think when we're walking around the shops or we're buying online, it's so tempting. And I think it's really important that we all acknowledge that there's a whole huge marketing piece that is there that's seductive and that's trying to pull us in so that we spend more. We all are human and we get caught up in it, and that's okay. It's okay that part of this is emotional. Where it stops being okay is when we sort of teeter into the place where we overspend or we do something that is going to hurt us later on. And that's where some of the shame can come in. How do I justify this? Or, potentially there's guilt around the fact that maybe I didn't spend enough time with this person, or I didn't give enough of myself. So I will compensate through overspending or through buying something that might be, a little more extravagant than I normally would have done. And that's something that I would caution against, to try to be mindful around the feelings that are associated with that, because Emily, they're really unconscious, right? So unless we're having these kinds of conversations and we're bringing up these topics, there's not that much that happens at the till in terms of the mindfulness.
It's too late.
It's too late, or it's filling, I got to get this done. There's a time pressure that's associated with it. Never mind, I'll deal with it later, right?
Yeah, so a bit of preparation, doing a bit of work around mindset and really thinking about these gifts, compensating. I think it's it's really important. But also something else we often discuss is the beliefs you may have about money, how you grow up. How does that influence the way we approach gifting today as an adult?
So it's always interesting to look at our childhoods, right, and our pasts, and that's certainly a place where I spend time with my clients on. Because that's where we learn, right? That is where we have our first memories. Our emotions are very tied to finances. How were these things dealt with in our own families? And consequently, how does that get played out later? So it's really useful and helpful to talk with our partners, our friends, whoever we're sharing this time with, in advance so that we can say, here's how I did it. This is what I remember. I would like to have this theme in my, my holiday events. How did you? What was important to you? What do we really want to take away from this time together so that we, yes, have presence, but we also have presence, right? We're also there. We're also together, connected.
I think it can take a lot of courage to also change a model that you've been following for years. You've been doing stuff on repeat without necessarily thinking about it. But this year you realize, I may not have enough money to buy all these gifts. And something we discussed actually with the Vestpod team last year is around Secret Santa. And what about even like for families, just do one gift to one person instead of buying like 10 gifts. But it's quite tricky to actually change these conversations with the family. So how are you having these conversations with your clients?
Yeah. First off, I love this idea of Secret Santa. I believe the impact and the effect of it is a calm. I think people understand it. There's clarity, there are rules, it's clear. We're all spending 15 pounds and this is what we're doing. And I think that puts people at ease. And that gives people a sense of, okay, I know what my boundaries are. This is what we're doing. I don't have to worry about whether someone will be spending more or less, or all of the, again, the stuff that can come along with that. So this idea of having clear Secret Santa, I think, and it's fun, and it's
really
creative,
fun.
and you have to, that's what gets noticed as opposed to the pound sign that's attached to it. So I do encourage more of those kinds of things. And the second part of your question was?
I think it's how do we open up the conversation with families and friends around this topic, because some people love buying gifts without necessarily having, the budget, but they love, to be and to receive a lot of gifts.
Yes.
So how do you go from consuming so much to actually deciding on, one thing, one gift, and making it special, but also making it maybe simpler, and some people may feel, it's not enough for them.
Yeah, actually, I had a client who had this very challenge, right? How do we do this? How do I change the narrative? If we've always done it this way and now we're doing it that way, how? And I think it comes down to preparing. It comes down to having the openness and, as you said, the courage to change things and to give a substantial reason why you might be changing things. Budgets just come out. Things are going to be more challenging. This year, we're going to do it this way. Or what do you think about it? Or can we all collectively come up with an idea that feels comfortable for us all so that we can engage and, get to the root of it all, which is together and fun, as opposed to buying and spending and sometimes not even really enjoying it. I mean, you have this image of getting too much. And then at the end of the day, people...
It's nothing. Yeah.
It's nothing. Yeah. It becomes insignificant, which is not the point of what we're trying to do right now.
And I think for kids, this is really relevant, but it's probably the hardest part. As a mom of 3, I'm now in the middle of, Christmas list, and they started to prepare their list. And they say, some of our friends have like 20 gifts and they're going to get everything. And I'm like, well, you can put one gift and you'll see if Santa will bring you this gift. But it's really hard to, again, like change the narrative of, what's happening. Christmas, you should, it's like you should have everything and there's abundance. Actually, no, it's probably better to just, teach your kids that they should have one thing, that they should take care of it, instead of having like these 20 toys and gift. But everything around, schools, festive, celebrations, it's just about buying more. You go in the shop, it's buying more. Yeah. So how do we... keep it change our narrative as parents, because that's really hard. There's a lot of pressure, even if, you want to be quite strong on this.
There is so much pressure. It's true. And I think sometimes just saying that, look at how much is out there. Look at what we're doing. I really want these presents to mean something to you. I want you to remember them for years to come. I don't want it to just be, another thing that you lose sight of. So being honest, I think, and having the conversations and getting them to buy in. Or again, maybe shifting how we do that. Maybe it's about a few things, or a few things that are sustainable, or a few things that are purchased at second-hand shops, and that equalizes things a little bit, where it's not about money per se, but it's about what's available. Yeah, it's about getting creative, I think, too. And
Yeah.
it's not easy because the pressure is strong.
Pressure is strong, so it's resisting to the temptation. Even for parents, you want
Of
to buy more
course.
for your kids, but I think it's having your limits and boundaries really
Absolutely.
important.
And having the conversation with your partner around that,
Yeah.
because I think that's really important when we come from different backgrounds or different childhoods, or, I mean, of course we will do, but when we have had the childhood that we had and the memories that we have had, it's important to talk about what the expectations are so that you're in alignment with your partner when you're going
Yeah.
through that, because otherwise that gets played out. And maybe that's not necessary if you do talk about it beforehand.
I think that's probably part of a much bigger conversation with your partner, and that's probably the tip of the iceberg. I know for Christmas is always the moment where you don't agree on things, you don't agree on spending, you don't agree on Christmas gifts. So how do you, maybe that's not for like December, but in January when people have been through this, hopefully they haven't overspent so much. How can you have this conversation and sort of prepare a little bit more with with your partner?
I think, again, literally making it very conscious and taking the time to talk about how we approach gift giving in general. What do how do each of you feel about it, and somehow come to a compromise so that each of you gets your needs met
Yes.
in terms of gift giving, because you said something before which is really important. It's not just about receiving gifts, right? It's about giving gifts. And some people find it easier to give. Some people find it easier to receive. It depends on the person. So to be able to have the conversation, to know each other in terms of how we like to receive and like to give is important.
So what happened if, at the end of this festive season, you've clearly overspent,
Yeah.
your account's in the red, you'll have to pay back your, credit card. Hopefully you didn't get into, too much debt or BNPL or anything like that. But, it may be a little bit too late. How can you be quite, compassionate? Can don't blame yourself for, the money mistakes you've made, but try to learn from them. How can you approach this sort of, new year where you're carrying this burden of
Yeah.
like Christmas?
I think number one is be compassionate towards yourself.
Yeah.
And instead of berating yourself, and instead of, being very self-critical, be able to acknowledge that, okay, yeah, I am in a little bit of a pickle here. I've gone overboard. And to understand why you might have gone overboard too, to really dig in instead of just ignore it, because if we ignore it, we repeat it. So to give yourself time to understand what was it that drew you in to overspending,
Yeah.
and in a compassionate way, again, in a way that says, it's hard to resist all of this. And I maybe didn't do the best job this time, but I am going to be courageous enough to look at my spending, figure it out, and approach things next time with a little bit more awareness going in, so that I ultimately don't end up in the same place. Compassion's key, though, on that.
As we approach, Christmas or the festive season, whether you're celebrating or not, very often you'll be joining big family gatherings. You'll all be together, maybe for a few days. Maybe you'll go on a trip together. Maybe there's going to be this, Secret Santa or gifting. That can be really stressful for a lot of people. So how do we approach this like festive season? And do you have any example from, one of your clients maybe?
Yes. So the festive season, again, as fun and exciting and joyful and all of that, accompanies the other side of it too, which is stressful and pressurized and overwhelming.
Yes.
Some dreading all that family time because family are full on. And how we navigate that can be really tricky. So, approaching that, I think, again, taking care of ourselves, even in those times when we are in big groups, making sure that you find a little bit of time for yourself so that you can come back and regulate and then be able to go back and approach things differently. The reason why family time can be so fractious and challenging at this time is because we sort of, when you get back into family systems, we regress. And, all those little sibling rivalry and challenges that we used to have growing up are actually still present. And we see, even though we're adults, we do see some of those behaviors playing out. And that's why it's pressurized, because we regress to who we used to be. And as fun as that can be, it can also be really challenging. There's some things that come up in the consulting room around how do we navigate going to our in-laws' house, for example, and what happens there. My mother-in-law really likes to overdo gift giving, and we as a family don't want to do that because we are in a different financial situation this year than we were last. And I'm having a really hard time because whilst I don't want to take anything away from my mother-in-law who loves to, shower the children with gifts, it's going to put pressure on my own mother and us who don't have the same financial resources this year. And that's a real problem. And that's a real challenge. And what my client's been working on is how to address that beforehand with as much understanding around what her mother-in-law wants to do, but also holding at the same time her mother, who's also feeling anxious about not being able to bring the same things to the table this year. So, talking about that out loud and being able to be courageous and having these difficult conversations ahead of time so that we don't go into already a highly charged atmosphere, all stressed. Because you can't have these kinds of conversations and they don't end well, right? They're just fully emotional and people behave in more instinctual ways as opposed to being able to have some time and logic. We get very emotional, which is all to be expected.
Yeah. And I feel some people also don't want to change. They've been doing, things one way and they want to
Definitely.
keep it this way because they like it. And that's fine. So you have to manage these situations.
But sometimes what happens in that case, though, Emilie, is that you put yourself
Yes.
aside,
Yeah.
right? And you sort of say, it's just one time, or I'm going to do it, or it doesn't matter. But it does matter. And finding the capacity to preempt some of that is a really useful skill to develop.
Yeah. And I think something growing up when you're, a little bit of the sandwich generation, you want to please your kids, you want to please your parents, you want to, please your partner. We need boundaries. How do you work on boundaries with your clients? Can you give me maybe a few examples? You talked about, you're in the family home, we all regressing a little bit. So maybe taking time on your own, maybe, I don't know, maybe not sleeping where you used to sleep as a kid, but maybe somewhere else. Do you have examples of how can we put boundaries around our, Christmas holidays?
Absolutely. And again, I think it's important that we understand that I think people get really nervous around that word, right? And around this idea of pulling back. But it's very important to be able to decide for yourself, what are you comfortable with, as opposed to just being led along by what has always been done or by whoever is more dominant in the family, perhaps, or doing what it is that our parents expect us to do. It's important to be able to ask yourself, how am I going to navigate the situation as comfortably as I can for me and my family now? So that can look like ensuring that you spend a little time en famille, just your own family, if you're staying with another, or with, in your old childhood home, going out for walks or taking that time away so that you can connect as yourself and your partner before coming back in, so that you're going in with a better attitude and feeling in control, as opposed to being swept away.
Yeah. And do you have any habits, anything we could start to implement from, the beginning of December, maybe when we're in this like rat race towards Christmas?
Breathing.
Breathing,
always good to take a breath, a real breath, and to ground yourself, right? So I know we know a lot about breathing, but the truth is there is a physiological impact that when you are taking in a breath and releasing it, it can be an easy one. It can be breathing in for 5 and holding your breath again for 5 seconds and then releasing for 10. If you can do that 4 or 5 times, you'll feel a difference in your body, in your nervous system will calm down. And when you are in a more calm state, you're going to make different kinds of decisions. So I would say really having a little bit of a breathing practice, as well as I'm a big fan of journaling. I believe pen to paper is really important because it takes your ideas that you have in your mind and it really concretizes them, and it helps you follow through with the things that you want to do. So it doesn't have to be reams of paper. It has to be a few ideas, especially at a time like this where it's so many things to do, so many lists to tick off. Getting it out of your head and onto paper as well, just as like an act of exorcising, literally taking it out, down, you then can have a look to see, and you have your head is free. So it's very, very helpful and useful practice. And a couple of words of gratitude, I think, help as well. Being grateful for what we have already is something that I like to do too.
Yeah.
We all have lots to be grateful for.
If you're listening, you're all doing great.
Exactly.
But when we feel that it's too much, sometimes you're in the rat race, you can't breathe anymore, you can't take time to think anymore, you can't journal anymore, you skip all your yoga and everything, maybe your January intentions, you don't even know what they are today. Where can we get some help and support when it all gets too stressful, or when the overspending gets like completely, out of control?
Yeah. Something that I always say, I heard long ago, and it's something I continue to say to my clients, but also to myself, is never worry alone. So when you get to that place and you are feeling stressed out, pick up your phone to make a telephone call, not necessarily sending a text, because the research shows that when we hear another person's voice, we are calmed in a very different way. To hear your mom's voice is very, very soothing. And it's one thing to send a text and there's connection there, but there's something about verbal communication and hearing a voice. So I would say make a phone call to a friend, to a mentor, to, an aunt, to connect with someone when we feel that way, to go into the streets or go into a coffee shop and actually say hello to a stranger, make eye contact with someone, to actually connect. And that really, really does help in all that time. Again, depending on how severe things are, there are always people to call, helplines and therapists, and there is plenty of help out there as long as we access it.
Thanks, Holli. Can I ask you, what does a psychologically healthy December look like? Emotionally regulated, financially contained, socially honest. Can you describe that for me?
Yes, I think it almost feels like a setup of a question, right? Because what does it look like? It's going to be different for everybody. But I think it's important to zoom out and realize and remember what it is originally that Christmas is about, holidays are about. They're about time together. They're about connection. They're about being together with a different quantity of time and different stress levels and different pressures. So I would say, again, spend the time talking, connecting, watching movies together, trying to spend time off screens, making a decision together as families and friends to put the phones away, to actually be together and hear how our years are going and some goals that we want for the new year too.
Thank you, Holli. It's great because we didn't talk about, individual gifts, but we talked about, experiences, emotions, spending time together. So it's a little bit of a, redefining this Christmas season for us. Thank you very much.
Definitely.
I have 3 rapid fire questions for you.
Of course.
One grounding practice someone can use immediately before spending.
I would say that take that breath before we tap, be it at a shop or online, to really take a breath and to buy with consciousness as opposed to frantic.
Yeah. It's too easy at the moment to
It's
just,
so
we
easy.
click. Our card details are
I
everywhere. You can buy from your phone. You have 5 minutes, you're browsing, even on social media now. You have the links
I
and you
know.
buy, and you don't even have to input your
God.
name or your address or anything.
I know.
And 2 days later, or 1 day later,
It's too easy.
you have it.
One thing I like to do online is I'll put things in a basket, right?
Yeah.
And so that you don't buy them right away, and then go back to them perhaps the next day and say, hang on, do I really want those things now? And if I don't, I'm deleting them. I'm not keeping them in there just in case. I'm actually going to make a decision to no longer have them be a temptation.
And usually, actually, when you're logged in on this website, they tend to send you a little discount if you leave it for too long in your basket. So that's a nice way to save a little bit of money.
That's true.
One small habit that reduces stress-driven spending over the week.
Keeping track of spending and making sure that we know what we're doing so that we have some control over it, and it's just not taking us over, but we know what we're doing very specifically.
Yeah. One sentence people should say to themselves before buying something they do not need for themselves or as a gift.
Yes. Will this still matter in January?
Yeah.
I know. It's
when
a hard
you wake up in January, it's a hard one.
Do I still want this? You know, should I have bought that? Did I need that? All of that sort of saying the same thing, but
great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much,
Take your
Holli.
pick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Wallet. I hope you have the tools that you need to approach this festive season. We wish you all the best for the end of the year, and make sure you subscribe to The Wallet on your favorite podcast platform.